Welcome. Sandoval Communications presents video streaming of the November 2020 board meeting of Sandoval's HOA. As a reminder, the December board meeting is scheduled for early January 2021. The live stream is simulcast on Sandoval's official communications Facebook page, Sandoval Cape Coral. Alternate viewing of this meeting is also available for your convenience 24/7 on our YouTube channel, Sandoval Video Box, and on Sandoval's website, www.livesandoval.com. Consider subscribing to support Sandoval Video Box on YouTube by clicking both the subscribe button and bell to be notified of future meetings and presentations by Sandoval Communications. The meeting will begin shortly. Sandoval Communications thanks you for your support and participation by watching this meeting.
Stand for the pledge to the flag. Again, yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right. Good evening. The November Board of Directors meeting is now called to order. It's 6:30 today, December 3rd. And we'll take roll call again. Vice President Ron Spooner. Present. Treasurer Bill Tubb.
Here.
Director Scott D. Philippus.
Here.
Director Melanie Palmer.
Here.
Director L. Roper.
Here.
Director Don Wells.
Here.
Thank you. Quorum is established. And General Manager, please confirm proof of notice.
Proof of notice.
Okay, very good. And are there any resident comments on tonight's agenda topics?
Yes, we have two agenda incoming questions from residents. The first one is from Gary Cuddy at 2609 Castleberry Court, and states, "It is our understanding that if anyone damages a gate or drop arm, they will be fined $500 by the HOA. With that said, how many gate strikes were documented year to date 2020 and how much damage reimbursement fines were collected?" And this one will be responded to moving down the agenda when we get to item 12, gate strike and deed restrictions. The second one is from Jim Whitsenman, and this is, "Could you please give a detailed explanation of the approved budget and the significant line item changes, in particular, the revenue reduction for line items 4240 through 4450, 2, the major budget increases in administrative and insurance expenses, 3, what is the status of the CenturyLink reserve funds?" And this will be addressed at the treasurer report later on in the meeting. And next we have meeting minutes.
Right. There were a number of past meeting minutes, starting with the two workshops held on October 14th and 15th, the October 28th budget workshop, and the October, was it the 22nd board meeting?
Regular board meeting.
The regular board meeting. So does the board have any edits or corrections to the past?
You got the 1028 budget workshop and the 1028 a special meeting.
Okay. There were 6 in total, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Casey shared these with us a while ago. Does the board have any edits or corrections to the minutes?
I move we approve them as presented.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, Scott, thank you. All in favor of approving the minutes as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, great. So the motion is approved as distributed. Thank you. All right. I'm going to give a quick president's report. So again, good evening to everyone. November was a very busy time for the board, and for that I'm grateful for the time and attention provided by various board members and the general manager. I trust everyone had a safe and healthy Thanksgiving, and now we look forward to the holidays and New Year. The December calendar includes a few socially distanced activities, to include the first night menorah lighting here out front, outside at the community center, the holiday tree lighting, and the home decorating contest. On December 1st, we kicked off our Toys for Tots collection, where residents may drop off toys or books unwrapped for ages 6 months through 12 years of age. This campaign will end on December 17th. A collection box is placed outside the community center doors Monday through Friday, 9 to 4, should you wish to participate in donating to this cause. And for that, I thank you. On behalf of the board, I wish to convey my appreciation to those residents who donated to the community food pantry drive benefiting the Cape Coral Caring Center. I'm aware that many within the community have been impacted with the pandemic, so it's comforting to know that our community cares and will step up and assist others in need. The Sandoval Community Association made 2 bulk donations on November 20th and again on November 25th, totaling over 916 pounds of non-perishables in time for Thanksgiving Day and the holiday weekend. So again, thank you all. On November 17th, representatives from Pond Watch and Solitude Lake Management met with members of the Lake Committee, the General Manager, and board representatives, myself and Scott DeFilippis. The session was recorded and posted to both the website and the Sandoval Facebook page for residents to hear the findings and positive steps taken in addressing ongoing management of our lakes and the success of our aeration systems. I think it's important to note, too, that the current lakes reporting can easily be found on the Sandoval website. On November 22nd, the board met to adopt the 2021 budget, resulting in a $10 per quarter increase for 2021. The master HOA quarterly assessment will be $600. The approved 2021 budget was emailed to residents and can easily be found on the Sandoval website. Our treasurer will address further the budget in his report. Earlier tonight, in a special 14-day notice meeting, the board passed a resolution authorizing electronic voting in the upcoming March 2021 Board of Directors election. Like last year, we plan to use the Becker ballot process, and additional information will be provided informing all residents of the electronic voting process. And if you prefer the paper ballot, that too remains an option for the 2021 election. More to come in the upcoming weeks. As a reminder, the December Board of Directors meetings will be held on Thursday, January 7th, due to the scheduled holidays. We have a very busy agenda. We're going to hear more about the construction update and some other, standing up some ad hoc committees. So let's get started. I'm going to turn to the treasurer for his report, please.
Okay, the October 31, 2020 financial highlights. The October 31, 2020 financials have been posted to our homeowners website for you to review. We received these financials on November 20th, and they've been distributed to both the board and to the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee met on Tuesday, December 1st, and reviewed the October financials. A review of the HOA accounts receivable delinquency account reveals that receivables over 90 days old are once again down by about 10%, from $83,000 to $75,000. One of last month's top 9 has paid off, and last month's number 10 has joined the other 8 to become the top 9. And out of that top 9, 1 is in bankruptcy, 6 have been turned over to the attorney for collections, 1 has set up a payment plan, and 1 just hasn't paid. The September 30 balances, as well as all expenditures from the Reserve Fund and the Telecommunications Surplus Fund, can be found in the financial statements presented on our website. Don Wells asked at our last board meeting for the past history of reserve funding by year, and I've prepared that comparing both our audited year-end financial statements and the reserve studies, the one done on 2016, and then as it was revised in 2019. In the year 2015, the reserve study required that we should, didn't require, but stated we should have $1,824,000 in the account. We had $1,704,000 at 12/31/15. Therefore, we were $119,000 short. In 2016, the study indicated $2,070,000 should be in there. We had $2,087,000, so we were $16,000 over at that point in time. December 31st, 2017, the reserve study said we should have $2,117,000 in the reserves. At 12/31, we had $2,015,000 in there, so we were $101,000 short. In 2018, the reserve study indicated $2,163,000 should be in reserves. We had $2,115,000, so we were $48,000 short at that time. In 2019, the reserve study indicated we should have $1,903,000 in reserves. We had $2,398,000 in reserves, so we were $494,000 overfunded at 12/31/19. And for 12/31/20, the reserve study suggests we should have $2,143,000 in reserves. And at October 31, 2020, we had $2,451,000. So we were $307,000 overfunded with 2 months' worth of contributions to come. So that's the status of reserves coming up to date. That would have been the end of my report tonight, but I have questions to answer, so I apologize for the time it's going to take. The 2021 budget was approved by the board, has been posted to the community website. We received questions regarding the reduction in revenue anticipation presented in the general ledger lines 4240 through 4450. General ledger lines 4240, 4301, 4310, and 4315 were not materially changed. The majority of the reductions, 4 of them, were related to interest income. If you've tried to renew a matured certificate of deposit lately, you realize that the 2 to 3% rate of return is no longer possible, but more likely you're going to get 0.2% to 0.3%. Due to the uncertainty of this market, which is the only market available to the HOA for our investments due to per board policy, we've removed it from the budget line item because it would be so small anyway, and whatever income we get in that will be reported, but we're not budgeting it. Late fees were eliminated from the budget as they are easily assessed but hard to collect. Our auditor will be reviewing the fees assessed in 2020 with an eye to writing some off. Application fees were not budgeted as this income was not an item we can count on. Room rental, 4302, and social income, 4303, were also reduced by about $6,000 as we currently, as of October 31st, are about $14,000 below the budgeted amounts in our 2020 budget. And until we see a reduction in the COVID-related issues, those incomes will likely be very small. Estoppel transfer and legal collections were also removed due to the uncertainty of generating revenues from this source. Fines, general ledger line number 4290, were cut in half from $24,000 in revenue in 2020 to $12,000 in 2021 to reflect the current collections, which, as of October 31st, 2020, were year-to-date $0. General ledger 4395 is included in general ledger 4301 rather than having duplicate lines in 2020. The largest reduction is line 4450, bulk telecom revenue. That revenue reduction equals almost to the penny the amount reclassed to general ledger 4100 operating assessments when added to the $10 per quarter per household increase in assessments. Any revenue recognized in any of these lines will be appropriately recorded and hopefully would allow us to finish the year 2021 with a surplus, which can go at year end into our fund balance, which some of you like to call a rainy day fund. And this is where we can draw monies in the future to cover unexpected expenses. Finally, we were asked to make what made up the major expenditure increases in administrative and insurance costs. As explained earlier, the administrative costs were taken from the Pope Properties proposals to the management contract RFP and would have been what we encountered had Pope Properties been retained as our management company for 2021. Actually, we expect those requirements to be smaller, but for budgeting purposes, we had to use a worst-case scenario to ensure adequate funds would be available in 2021. We've had multiple discussions and explanations at past board meetings regarding General Ledger Line 5415, Insurance Liability. For our 2020 budget, which was approved in December of 2019, we budgeted $34,028 for insurance liability. In February 2020, approximately 10 days prior to the renewal date, our general liability of our general liability policy, our general manager informed the board that the Sandoval HOA had been non-renewed by our carrier. This was due primarily to losses and claims from the period 2015 through 2017. In order to find coverage, we had to purchase a policy costing Sandoval approximately $15,000 per month, rather than the $2,835 we had budgeted. If you look at our October 31st, 2020 financial statements, you will see we are currently $88,722 over budget for that line item, and that's for 10 months. The 2021 budget has been adjusted to recognize this horrendous increase so that we will not be over budget next year. Thank you.
Just have a quick, hi everybody, General Manager's report. UPS has placed 2 pods down at Calypso Park, and I understand from last year that the location was at the clubhouse, and we've moved it down to Calypso this year in anticipation for the start of construction and from a safety standpoint, as well as convenience for the residents. These pods are in place, and the delivery drivers will be driving through the community. We ask you to please be cautious and keep an eye out for these drivers. Next topic, compliance. The deed restriction enforcement has a well-established process and timelines in place. I've received positive feedback regarding a significant improvement in the community. Several items coming up have been pressure washing items, and we just would like to remind the residents that although you may enjoy using the same vendor, you may need to shop around if they don't have availability within the time frame allotted. The large umbrellas at the pool were damaged prior to the storm, so we weren't able to take those down for the storm, but we did have a company come out, and they're working to provide us a proposal and get those large umbrellas corrected so that we can put the caps back on them, and then in future storms be able to bring them down. They weren't able to come down at all. The Pine Island Gate part has been on order for longer than we would all like. These parts are hit or miss from where they're ordered from, per Bose Electric. The part did come in today and will be replaced tomorrow. That's all I got. So you want to pause and take a break for the 6:45 appointment?
And some related parties, including the Taylor Morrison directors who ran the board during the period of developer control. A lot of work went into this, and I really appreciate the committee's work, in particular Ron Spooner, Don Wells, Al Roper, and in particular David Hiller. David has been incredibly helpful in helping to gather documents and really put this together in a persuasive way. So definitely want to give him a shout out and the rest of the committee as well. So we will continue to keep everyone updated and look forward to getting this resolved.
For a motion for the board to authorize proceeding with the lawsuit brought on behalf of Sandoval by our counsel Morgan & Morgan regarding claims related to Taylor Morrison.
All right. Okay. And discussion?
I'll just add that I believe it was in 2018, there was a community-wide vote that took place that did pass. There was no lawsuit filed related to that. There was some preliminary workup. So this motion is in direct relation to that community-wide vote. And again, I'm asking for the final step, which is board authorization.
Continued to proceed not at a snail's pace as we're waiting for city approval on 2 building permits. I asked our construction folks if they had any information, and I'm going to read it to you verbatim as to the reply. I asked, do you have any additional information that I can report here at the board meeting? Yes, we're expecting the renovation permit in the next few days, and the new building permit is scheduled out on 12/24, so that's Christmas Eve. We have authorized a small purchase of some building materials that we can save a little money by getting them purchased now rather than waiting. It's also the purpose of that is since it's a small amount, we're testing the system and how it's going through the financial process, and I think that has been very helpful because we found how we need to make that work and also have a review process. One of the things that I think is very important that the community knows is that we don't just get an invoice from Stevens Construction and then we're looking it over and we pay it. That invoice is sent to the architect. They then certify that these charges are in line with the projected cost of the project and that that work has been done before that is paid. So that certification is a vital step, and as Casey might point out, that certification on the invoice was bigger than the name Stevens Construction, and so it's very prominent, and it's also very important, and it's protecting all of us. Once that happens, the invoice goes in. We then review it here in Sandoval to make sure that we don't have any questions, and then it's authorized for payment. So I think there's so many checks and balances here that I feel comfortable in the way the process is going to play out. And if we can, excuse me, if we get a building permit, I will have an e-blast to the community to tell you that we do have one in hand. So that's it.
Undertaken review of our amenities and to make sure they are upgraded. So when the community center is completed, the expansion is completed, everything feels new and fresh, and that includes the resurfacing of the basketball courts, tennis courts. So it's a really opportune time to have the pickleball players and the tennis players come together, have some representatives, communicate with us so we can represent the wishes of the community in the new plan. But time is ticking on this, and I would emphasize that we really need to come up with a finalized plan because we expect to have this done as part of the expansion.
So would you like to recommend that we have we call it an ad hoc committee or an ad hoc group to...
Or would it be just a fallout of amenities?
We have an amenities committee that they've...
We would like something just of pickleball and tennis players, not an amenities committee.
We'd like to be a little more surgical on this issue because it really, there's two factions that it really focuses on, and I'd like to make sure that we take the time to hear all the input before our decision and hopefully get them to work it out.
Yeah.
So could you solicit tennis and pickleball representatives to form a group to meet and present a recommendation to the board? Isn't that kind of what you think, Ron?
That's exactly basketball was that? No,
I don't think we need it.
I think the basketball plan is straightforward. We're going to do a resurfacing. There's, and I think that's pretty straightforward. But that's my opinion, but I'm open.
Do we want to put a number of members on there and have a liaison from the board like we normally do sitting?
Yes. Yeah. And the funding for that would come out of reserves, right? The paving, the repaving,
Yes, that's
resurfacing.
correct.
That was a 2019 reserve fund item that
That's
was
still
not
open.
utilized.
Right. I just wanted to clarify that for everybody.
That's going to be moved, and I think the clubhouse committee will oversee that as far as location. And
Because we put that under the umbrella of our construction manager. It's no longer an outside project. It's under the expansion.
the funding for that is in the bid price of the clubhouse,
Right. Right.
including moving the lights and all that.
So Stevens Construction is aware that's part of their responsibilities.
All right, so the general manager will solicit volunteers, pickleball, tennis players, to come together with recommendations for the board. So at the next board meeting, we should have names identified, and possibly they will have had an opportunity.
Do we need to wait till the January the 7th for them to meet, or? Do we need to approve who's going to be on it, or I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I think we should get together sooner rather than later. I think there's significant negotiations that need to take place.
No weapons are allowed.
And
You want to establish the board liaison?
yes, and I don't know who would be best in that
Yeah.
role, frankly.
Does someone want to volunteer to be the board liaison? Come on, you're a pickleball player.
Oh, no. I play more bocce ball than pickleball.
I think Al would be a good one.
Yeah.
All right, Al, thank you.
Thank you, Al. I was getting nervous.
And with the amenities,
I think it's important to pull in at least the amenities chairperson in that,
Yeah.
in some capacity. They've been instrumental with getting proposals and things like that, so.
thank you. All right, we're good? Anything else done on the clubhouse? You're good?
No.
Okay, great. So next we have the Risk Management Committee. Bill?
Okay, the Risk Management Committee met last night. In attendance were Stan Toro, who logged in initially but had to go, had other commitments, so he left. Dave Nerome, Bill Dunker, and myself. Absent were Barbara Galliuppi. I don't know how to pronounce her name. Gallupi, Craig Snyder, and Ron Spooner. Meeting commenced at 6:15. We discussed the goals of the committee and pretty well came up with the goal is to liaison between the board of directors and management to assist in setting policies, procedures, and actions to limit claims and losses. We discussed objectives. Those were to take actions necessary to take actions necessary and make suggestions necessary to reduce our liability claims, to assist in the review of past claims and losses, to suggest ways and techniques to reduce our liability claims and losses to both the board and management, to set up incident reporting and guidelines to documenting any incident or claim as soon as possible to reduce the magnitude of the claim or to assist in the defense against the claim, to review HOA contracts with vendors to identify areas of potential liability and ensure proper certificates of insurance are in place to protect the HOA from claims by vendors or their employees, and to review HOA contracts with vendors to identify areas of liability that we are assuming in those contracts. We elected officers. Votes were unanimous. Craig Snyder as chair and Stan Toro as vice chair. And that was it. We had a question about the CenturyLink memo of understanding and the ad hoc committee setting that we were gathering to do that, but that's
on the agenda,
you'll
yeah.
deal with that at the time. So that's all I have for the risk management.
I could add something to risk management. First, in my defense, I was only noticed 24 hours before the meeting took place, and I did say I had a prior commitment. That said, the meeting was very important because we're at a very important point with our new management company. We are going to be putting together an operations manual, and we're setting certain expectations on the new management company in terms of risk management. So a lot of the ideas that are coming out of this committee will work themselves into our operations portion of our agreement with the new management company. And I think we have a particularly strong committee. I think we're going to picking up where we left off, and it's positive for all of us.
Very good, thank you. Last month, we closed out the two ad hoc committees, namely the capital improvements. Al, you specified that the scope of work was completed. And the RFP, Melanie, right? The scope of work was completed. So we want to just thank those volunteers who participated and contributed over the period that the ad hocs were stood up. Thank you. All right, next on the agenda, we have the old business of street paving. And Ron, again, any updates on?
We did finally get the second company out to give us a bid. Unfortunately, that process took a bit longer. There were numerous scheduling issues, not on our end, we'll say. But we did get the final bid. We have a contract in hand, and our expectation, at least from them, is that the project should start about January 15th.
Anybody? Anything else? Casey, you're good? All right. Next, we have the old business, the assisted living facility. Do you want to just comment on the latest development?
In our prior discussion over the summer, we brought some representatives from the assisted living facility, proposed assisted living facility, to meet the residents and discuss their plans. They asked for our support. We set certain expectations in place prior to giving that support. We've exchanged some documents that initially didn't meet our expectations, but we're moving closer. We have not finalized those agreements yet because, frankly, there is still more details that need to be placed in those agreements. So that's, frankly, the update.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next, we have a topic that we just want to provide some information, basically addressing the use of contingency funds and also reviewing the process known as BAR, the Budget Authorization process. I'm going to ask Casey to address it, please.
So we'll implement the budget authorization request that will, the GM will provide a formal memo request identifying reserves or contingency fund request, depending on which item that would come from. And then the GM would provide this description to the board, including the reserve line item being requested or contingency fund line item, the amount, the description, the proposal, and notes, as well as following actions to track and then properly close out each BAR request or budget authorization request, each BAR.
And that would be voted on by the board?
That would have to be, the board always has to approve expenditures from the reserves or the contingency fund.
So for each and every reserve expenditure, the community will have the opportunity to hear what those funds are being used at a notice board meeting, and the board will vote on whether to authorize those funds. And that is also true with the contingency funds.
That's
is that correct?
Right. So it's a formal process, basically, a recordation, a system of records.
Correct.
So,
and it helps set the expectations
and again,
of the residents.
Transparency and accountability.
Do you feel the need to make a motion to establish this and move forward?
I would absolutely like to establish this as
The budget authorization request has been done, since it became, HOA community run. And we always received an official packet. It had the board authorization request. It was a form, what the cost was. It included where the bids came from, what the cost of each one of those bids were. Then there was discussion by the board, and then it was voted on. Now, when Jerry came, that became a little less formal, and I think we should go back and I think the pattern of what we used in the past, the first couple of years of the board, would be the good sample.
the main point that I want to make is that I want to establish a protocol that sets what the residents can expect from us in terms of how we spend their money, that it's done in front of them at a notice meeting.
I think something that was lacking that I brought up in a previous board meeting, and I still think it's important, is that when you do these projects, everybody says, okay, it's going to be X number of dollars, and we're all fired up, and then the project gets done, and then once it's done, you never hear another word about it. I think you need the last step of that process, I think, needs to be a report on how much it cost you to do it after all was said and done.
And confirmation.
That we would track it.
That has never been done.
To include the
I think it's
closeout
something
and the
that
total cost.
needs to be done.
Correct. That's part of the what she proposed. Or what
And I
she-
assume any dollars that are not spent on that particular project
Goes back into the
source.
goes back into the reserve.
Yeah.
Or
Or
wherever it came from.
contingency.
The bar is adjusted to reflect what actual expenditures were.
that this board make a resolution that before expending any of these funds, it'll be at a noticed meeting, voted on, and if we want to make more detailed protocol separate from that, that's fine. But the crucial portion of this is that it's in a noticed meeting, that it's voted on. And I do think it's
never been one that protocol wasn't followed, but to have a resolution to say it, I'm not opposed to that at all.
So we know.
But I also would like to include the final report of what was spent.
I agree. I think that's absolutely
What I
crucial.
hear Ron saying is that we've done pretty much this in the past, but it was never an established policy passed by the board
And
that we
I'm
should
all
have
in
to do
favor
it.
of having a
And that's
policy.
what he's saying. Let's establish that policy
And
going
this-
forward.
And this was never done with contingency funds, only reserve funds,
Yeah.
and we're expanding it to contingency funds
Yeah.
because we don't want a slush fund just to
Write some
make
checks.
things a bit more unclear for the residents.
I was a little thought contingency meant, if there's something that's in the budget that came up that was over, like, for example, the insurance, that was our backup. And, it's 2 or 3 months of your operating budget, kind of like a, unexpected. I didn't see it. I mean, if you want to expand it to including, capital improvements and things like that, I mean, that's kind of what it sounds like that you'll be voting on. I'm not sure that that's the definition of contingency.
Well, I agree with your definition of contingency. I think adding that step makes the residents aware that we are over in particular jail lines. It highlights it. It gives us an opportunity to discuss the reasons for it. It makes this board accountable to the residents for why we're over the jail line. And it requires every board member to take a position on whether we expend these
So then
funds
it
or not.
should be a contingency of jail lines in the operating budget.
Well, the difference, I think, the contingency line is a one-year line that we're funding money. Hopefully, we will not expend it, and when we don't expend it, it'll fall at year end into our fund balance. That fund balance is where we would draw, where you'd have 2 or 3 months of operating expenses that we could use in the future if we have to. But that one line item is just a one-year thing, and it would go away at the end of the year if you don't, because if there's a profit at the end of the year, a positive balance.
So how
that goes
will
into the fund
the
balance.
residents know that we have an accumulated 2 to 3 month?
In their financial report,
In the monthly
every month,
financials.
they see what the fund balance is.
So there's a line.
Is that
Yes,
just
on the balance sheet.
just the balance, or is there a specific item showing how that's grown?
The
No,
excess.
it's
It's not going to be a specific item.
It's just balance. It's
right. It's just
the
whatever
board-
the
the
balance
board would
is
have-
versus what the budget spent is.
Yeah, the balance would the expenditure from that would have to be voted on and approved by the board to spend something
See,
outside of the budget.
what you did so nicely with the reserve account, each year and what the reserve requirement was and how we ended up with the balance, just to know that, we right now we're sitting a little bit above what was required. I think something like that is really, you'd be able to understand it. I don't think anyone will ever understand that you just look at the balance and know that we've got that
a lot of
contingency.
math would have to take place.
Right. I
Can we
think we need to be able to tell the residents that we now have a reserve fund balance in our operating budget equivalent to 1 month.
No, you can't.
You don't have a reserve fund balance in your operating budget because that's not where it is. It's in the balance sheet. The budget is in the P&L. So it's two different animals. But the profit at year end, the positive balance of monies that you collected that you didn't spend, that goes into the fund balance. So you're never going to have a breakdown of here are the items that fund balance is going to go to. That's just our savings account. That's our rainy day fund. And then if you want to say we've got 2 or 3 months worth of operating, you have to identify 2 or 3 months worth of operating is $800,000, and you can see we have at least $800,000 in our fund balance.
And somehow in a report, we need to be saying this out loud, how that's kind of running.
Well, that's true, and we've got to get a positive fund balance to do that because we've got a negative fund balance now.
Well, we need to know that too. Does everyone know that we have a negative fund balance?
It's in the financial statement.
Yeah, well, but I just think it needs to be, that's the kind of thing that I think residents need to be aware of. That's why you had an increase in the dues, not just because you wanted to.
So maybe for the monthly treasurer's report, maybe we can have like a little template that.
Well, the fund balance only changes once a year after the audit. So the audit report tells you what that is. That is the report you're talking about. And that's posted on the website every year.
Yeah, in the April timeframe or
Yeah.
April, May timeframe?
Yeah, it takes them from January till mid to end March to do it, and then around April we get the report and we post it.
And the contingency is what will later be the fund balance if it's not spent. So I'm hoping future boards will provide that on a monthly basis with the financials when there is a fund balance. This is something that's very important to the residents. It's been raised for the last
this is
2
what
years.
makes people comfortable or makes people nervous.
It does. And the reason why we can't provide that yet is because a fund balance wasn't previously created. But we do have...
It was created. It's on every audit report we've ever had.
Funded is the key word here, okay?
You said
I don't care if it's got a zero next to it.
Correct.
And that's the essential
Well, if
portion
it's
of it.
negative, I think you need to be telling people it's negative.
Oh, absolutely.
But we do have over $100,000 in a contingency line item that, if not spent, will go into our fund balance. And that's what I'm focusing on here is prior to spending those contingency funds, I would like it to be raised before the community voted on, so we don't have a false expectation that there will be all these funds, contingency funds, going into a reserve balance.
So that's my question is, obviously we have the budget and we know everything's going to meet up to roughly what we've said, what we're going to spend and what we're spending it on. But these two line items of 8003 and 8030, we're saying that with these two, if we take money out of these two, then it needs to come before the board and say what exactly we're spending that money on.
Correct.
Is that those two line items?
Well, I don't have it in front of me. Before we say particular line,
8003 is where we transfer money that we collect in assessments into reserves.
Okay, so
yeah.
that's something different.
So it's a different. We're referring to one line item as contingency
8030 is
80-30.
contingency,
and then reserve fund.
and it's 125,000.
So everyone knows, according to the operating budget, how their money is spent, and that will also include reserves, which we're formalizing, and the contingency funds. It's just not some slush fund. It's an actual, has a purpose. And if we're going to dip into that, I think the residents should know.
I would like to talk to Tony Gregory, our auditor, because Jerry always said this budget is set in stone. You can't change anything. Some are going to be over, some are going to be under. At the end of the year, you got a plus or a minus. I think we should be able to, with a board vote, move $25,000 out of contingency up into whatever.
And that's what I want. That's
zero
why I want.
expense.
That's a very good
And
point.
we can make that change and see what it is on our.
I just don't want that taking place in the back office. I want it taking place in front of the residents, hence the vote.
I think what Jerry was saying was we couldn't just increase one because our assessments have already been set, and that's what's going to be funded for the budget. So we couldn't increase like insurance last year because the budget was already set.
Right.
And so that number had to stay that number. But I think we could move from one number to another number as long as the total doesn't change. But I'd like to Tony Gregory's.
And hence, that's the reason we have a negative fund balance, was because the rate of our insurance went up dramatically, and we were informed in February after the operating budget was set.
Right.
But I would like to make a motion to make sure that we get a vote on this, to make sure that prior to utilizing any reserve funds or contingency funds. Question, do we want to include in future balances?
You mean goals to say numbers that should reach a certain number?
I'm
not sure what you're asking.
I want to make sure that our contingency, obviously each year we're going to have a contingency which is going to go into the fund balance. Do we want to expand contingency / fund balances? Because once there's a fund balance, that is to the discretion of the board, and before tapping into that, again, I would like residents to know that. So do we want to expand contingency to include fund balance is my question.
I'm not following your question. Expand contingency to include fund balance.
I want to vote before we spend any reserve dollars or contingency funds. Contingency funds will turn into fund balance.
Money out of our fund balance.
Exactly.
Authorize expending something over our budget, which would draw our fund balance down.
I don't want any discretionary funds used that are separate from the operating gel lines, just, without letting the residents know and getting a full board vote.
Well, just to Don's point, on the October 31 financial statements that are on the website that each one of you have received, if you look at the balance sheet, in operating fund, total fund balance is negative $98,006.34. Each one of you have seen that if you've read it. That is what it was at audit time at the end of the year last year. This year, as of October 31st, we're actually showing that we've got a $1,998 loss. So that would increase that $93,000 negative by $2,000 if we finish the year right now. We know we're $88,000 over in insurance, but we've got a lot of other line items that are under. That's why we're not $88,000 in the hole right now. So if we don't expend those monies in the year, we may wind up break even for the year.
Right.
And that's kind of what contingency would be. You put that 125 in there, you overspend this one, but you don't touch that one. Bottom line, you break even again.
And again, just not to be a dead horse, but that is why I want the residents to know. It brings their attention to particular areas like insurance that are over budget.
Yeah.
So I like to,
again, that's incumbent on the residents and the board to read the financial statements to see that.
well,
But
no,
you're saying about
because
spending it,
that's
right?
not accurate. Spending is what I'm concerned with.
Right.
Reading
Okay.
a budget report in reaction to monies already spent doesn't help me. I want a board vote and communication with the residents before it's spent.
To expend money. I get you with that, yeah.
So that's my motion. I'm just going to expand it from contingency to fund balance.
You can summarize that, right?
To expand it to mean expenditures from contingency or fund balance.
Correct. Thank you.
Hello.
Okay,
Did I second it?
So Ron's motion.
think you
I'm
just
in my
did.
second.
You second it? Okay, Bill seconds it. All right. Discussion?
Good idea.
All right, so the motion on the table is to, prior to expenditures from reserves or contingency fund balance.
No, or contingency or fund balance.
Or fund balance,
Yes.
okay, a third category.
Yeah.
All right, that the bar process is followed, that the residents are informed, the board votes prior to any expenditures.
And we have an update, as Casey alluded to the conclusion of the project,
Right.
how much it cost and how much will be going back.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Everybody, 7. Thank you. Good. Thank you, Ron. No, that's truly important from an accountability standpoint and transparency standpoint, so thank you for that. I know we've discussed it. All right, next on the agenda, we have new business, and this is the fining and suspension levies. And it's nice to see that our deed compliance program is robust. And
Okay,
turn it over to Casey.
thank you. The Covenants Committee met, and they have voted and recommended that the following accounts be charged for deed restrictions, violations. Account number 16533, 16543, 16431, 17072, 16587, and those are all for $1,000 fines.
So in this case, the committee recommended $1,000 fines for each of the 5, right? 5?
Correct.
5 accounts.
And then the next category is for conduct violation. And the committee would like to see the use rates also be suspended for a period of time. And this would be for account number 15735. And the fine is for $100. The next two are gate strike fines, account number 15471, 17242, and those are both for $100 gate strike fines. And with that, we did have the comment come in requesting updates on the gate strike. We did discuss that in the September board meeting, what the protocol was for the gate strikes in very detail.
And basically, the fine is $100. However, the signage
Which we are updating.
at the gates references the $500. And when the gate is damaged, we recover the cost of repair.
How many gate strikes did we have? You say there were 2 fines. How many gate strikes did we have last month?
That we were able to attach to accounts. I don't have the total in front of me, but
I think that's an important number. I think that's what this gentleman who sent you the note wanted to know. I mean,
no, he wanted to know the income as far as
I think there's
what
a
we
lot
had
more than
collected.
2. I think there might be more like 20.
No, at the Covenants Committee, we had maybe 4 or 5 gate strikes at the Covenants Committee. It wasn't 20.
They were backed up, right?
Yeah. So
Then we're not capturing them.
We don't have cameras going out.
correct. We were able to connect.
Right,
At exit, there's no cameras, right?
correct.
There's cameras, but it's not for the license plate reading, but there are cameras.
I think it would be important if you kept a record of each time you sent somebody out there to reset the gate, so you'll know how many gate strikes you have.
On our security report every morning, we see
He's fixing the
3,
gate every
4
night,
times.
or
He's
1 or
fixed
2
the
or
gate
3.
every night.
So if you figure that, and there's 30 days in the month, that's 60 strikes, and we're finding 2.
What are some of the challenges you're being met with in terms of attaching a fine to a particular gate strike?
And there's a procedure in place, and it's that Envera notifies us when the motion detector alerts them. They send us, the staff has a policy in place, and then we go through if they're able to connect that to a resident, or just recently we had a vendor that hit it, we'll be sending them a bill, or they followed behind someone and bumped it and it came off. So we would try to go after the vendor as well. Envera, I would say not all the time are they able to connect that person to anybody in the community.
Could we step in, rather than being solely reliant on Envera, add whether it's office staff or security, another approach to this? Because we know these gate strikes are happening. We know Envera is not capturing them. We know we're replacing the bar. Every time we replace the bar, we should be able to identify remotely about the time the gate strike hit, communicate that information to Envera, and put the onus on them to respond back to us. And once we get that information, maybe our capturing of fines would be a bit higher.
So I'm missing.
Do we have the ability as a HOA to go to the state of Florida with a tag number and find out who that owner is?
Envera does that.
But I know, I'm asking, do we have the ability to do that ourselves?
No,
Then that's going to limit our ability.
we don't have
Well,
access.
Envera works for us. We tell them there's a gate strike. We tell them we need this information, this time, send us the information, and they should do it, frankly.
And Envera
We get
pulls.
quite a bit. I get, throughout the course of a week, I get notification after notification from Envera. They'll say, the notification is the gate strike took place. And then they'll send us, once they see if they can find the registration and connect it to someone, you'll get a second follow-up with the footage, or request the footage, but they automatically send it for us. So then we get that footage. They'll let us know, yes, we were able to connect to this specific person, and they'll pull the exact information from the resident, and then, or no, we weren't able to connect it to anyone. So that would be anybody that has put their vendor or a guest or a friend or a relative tag number, because typically when you authorize someone as a guest, you have to put information. So sometimes it'll pick up, typically it's off of a tag number when they send us over that information. And we'll get multiple, and I'll question, I'll say, is this all we're going to the Covenants Committee with? This is all we have, right? We go through what we've been sent and what Envera is able to connect. So I think that's the missing piece, is how do you connect when they're not able to,
I'm just not really understanding why they're not able to.
It's not quite as black and white as you would like to think it is.
Yeah.
In other words, you've authorized Aunt Martha to come to your house 2 weeks ago, and she's still on your list. Okay, she comes in last night and hits the gate. Vera goes back and sees that she's on your list. You get the fine.
Well, then she has an opportunity to go and argue the fine, explain the circumstances, or take her off the list.
That's what we
But
recommend.
they get to state their case, and not every single time is it black and white. Like Al said, you have some
And
situations
that's fair.
where
That's why we have them.
right, and we'd like to be.
So 98% of the gate strikes are not the people's faults. What you're saying, you're collecting 2. We figure there's 30.
Not that they're not the people's
They're
fault.
unable to
that they're-
capture.
Yeah, but so the system
Well,
is
it's
basically.
What I can do is I can give you a breakdown of how many Envera sent us versus how many they were able to connect to somebody.
Are
But
they only
what's
connecting to residents?
that's what's bothering me. Connect to. They should tell us who's the owner of that car, whether they're a registered guest or not.
But they're not the police. They're pulling from the database of each resident's registered car from our
Okay,
database.
so we may not know who that tag belongs
But they have to be
That's what they're
connected.
saying. They're telling us
Okay.
that would be filing a police report. I don't know the extent of trying to track down the, $100 and going through that process every single time would be,
But don't they have to be connected with a resident? That's what I'm not seeing.
no, because you have people that come, the whole reason they're hitting the gate is they're not on the authorization.
They're running it and hitting it when it tries to come back down.
So
They're tailgating.
How many times
We-
have you had somebody tailgate you?
It certainly has happened. I agree. It is dangerous.
I think it was
never.
coming up with something if
Step on my
you
brakes.
have,
I do too.
20 people for the month that did hit the bar.
Okay.
And then Envera is able to do, say, 10, 8 to 10, maybe. That's a good day. And then really there's some loopholes or something they weren't, this, that, and the other, and you go down to like 4, and then 4 show up, and then you're only down to 2, so it dwindles down. What you want is every single person that hits that gate to have a consequence. So
Right.
if we cannot connect them to a resident, how do we run the tag number? And I'm open to suggestions. How do we run the tag? How do we pursue that? What does that look like? Is it?
It's a damages claim, frankly. That's all it
And
is.
what does that
They're
look
not
like? Is
subject to
that?
fining.
How do we connect or identify people going out the exit gate? Because they haven't put a card in.
The same. It would. Again, it's based off of if we can connect them to somebody,
But
or it's either a resident or a guest. But
So, I mean, do they
Or
get the
vendor.
tag number on every vehicle going in to remember that that's this driver's license connected to that tag, so when I leave,
Well,
they
like
can
the-
go back?
the veterans has the cameras on the outside, not on the. So I don't know that it's picking up the tag number.
Well, and how many of our gate hits are on our exit gates as opposed to our entrance gates?
That would be a different evaluation to
Yeah.
see.
I think we're
I think entrance is.
I think we're putting the onus, though, at the wrong place here. We're thinking about brainstorming what we can do and what policies we can do. We're paying a large portion to Envera, and I think they need to be here in front of us addressing the board's question,
Right.
why we aren't getting a result for the dollars we're paying Envera, and what their cure would be for our concerns, because our expectations are that we're paying X amount of dollars a month and a year to Envera, and I personally don't believe that we're seeing any fruits from our money. I can tell you that probably there's enough people on this board who have reset enough drop arms that I'd be questioning Envera. Number one, why isn't the GM getting a report that there's this person out there, 5'8", with a a Gator shirt on myself. Why is he resetting that? That's on camera. If I'm doing it, resetting an arm, and Vera should be sending an immediate note that there's somebody out there. So I think our expectations as a board and as residents is not being met by Envera, and they need to come here and say how they should capture that tag and what the process is and why they can't do it. And if they can't do it, well, then guess what? We're going to do an RFP next time to find another gate vendor.
I'll make a motion that we invite an Envera representative to be at our next board member to answer those exact questions.
Well, I want to make sure that we have the tools necessary to question them appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that is knowing the exact number of gate hits, how many Envera reported, and unfortunately, it sounds like we're going to have to do some homework on our end and to properly hold them accountable. Because I'd like to ask them, how come we only had 8 reports on gate strikes when internally we had 48?
And I don't think we should be wasting time.
Today is the 3rd day of the month. Can we task?
That's where I was going.
Researching, looking at the cameras, I bet you it's significant.
It's not that. It's not that. They send over that it happened, alerts us, and then they send us that we connected it. Here's the link. Here's the video. We save it. We bring it to the Covenants Committee if needed.
Do we get a monthly report from them? A report, whether emailed or paper report, saying here's your gate strikes. Here's the tag number. We've traced it back to the resident. Is there something tangible that you look at or that the board can?
Not a summary, no.
Okay, well, that to me is a shortcoming with the company, because at the end of the year, I would expect as a board member and a resident that we're paying this money, they should be generating a report to us saying, Sandoval, you had 30 gate strikes. We were able to capture 22 tags, and whatever you want to do with your Covenants Committee. If we're having to chase down that offender, that to me is we're doing their job. So I find it very disconcerting.
Report, I mean, it's
correct.
It's nightly.
Yep.
Multiple
gates. I mean, to me, it is a significant problem. And from what we're hearing here on Covenants reports, we're not getting anybody.
Today is the 3rd day of the month.
In terms of dollars.
Can we task Casey with, over the next 30 days, collecting the information of how many resets either our employees or our volunteers do, and compare that to the number of gate strikes that Envera reports to
That's
us?
exactly the information that I want.
Can you?
Sure.
Can you do that?
Matrix, yeah. I know when Jerry was here, Melanie and I were trying to get some reports out of him. Do you remember, Melanie, when we were...
Right. We wanted to know how many.
We wanted throughputs and gate strikes, and when we closed Trafalgar, remember the impact to the community. We wanted to see, typically prior, how many were going through. Also, too, we were talking about peak periods and the possibility of leaving the swing gate open, the bar down with the swing gate open to limit the, operating of the arm, whatever. And that's something that's going to come up later. Open forum comments. But Jerry insisted that Envera couldn't do reports, detailed reports, and it was super frustrating for us.
I just don't understand how you can't generate a report if everybody is somehow scanning, whether it's a card or a headlight, somehow you're scanning to get in. How can you not tell me how many times that's been run? And I think it would be important to see from a percentage, like is there one gate that's getting hit from a higher percentage than a different, and it's...
Entrance and exit. So that the information can be captured.
Right.
It's on my list right here. Agenda items, new agenda items.
All right, so Bill was talking about a motion to invite Envera to come in for the January 7th.
Well, let's let her generate the data first.
All right. And then maybe from a board perspective, Scott, how would you like to frame some discussion points, questions for Envera? We can feed them to you, and maybe, when the time is right, we can sort of frame it for Envera. These are the points we want to discuss.
Sure, and I don't mind doing that. Just look at the time frame, because elections are coming up, and as everybody knows, I'm not running for re-election. So if it's past March,
like January.
I won't be here.
We'll get the report January, if we do it for a month, January 3rd. So,
Just looking for continuity, yeah.
yeah, so, by the first week of January. But we can feed you, and here's another point, and maybe you can just structure it from a gate perspective. And I know you've reset it a million times, so you know what some of the concerns are and how it works with the cameras.
I think we need to have all the volunteers who reset the gates for us report to Casey that they've done it so that she can track it.
Okay.
And that's just another thing too, in that which we'll talk to you about with Envera is, previously Envera would call the GM, you have a gate strike, and then one of us would possibly be notified to do it. We'd find out from Envera if that's the best feasible way to do that. Having to wait for Envera to come out to reset a drop arm to me is ridiculous because number one, I'm probably going to get charged. I don't think that's included. And it's only the drop arm.
When do we wait for? Oh, over the weekend? No, the security. So we have throughout the day. We have part-time. They get it done right away. If it takes place, it's not often during the day that it takes place.
So if there's a drop arm strike that's stuck up against the...
And Vera will remotely reset that.
No, if it's stuck up when it's out of the
popped
cradle, it pops out.
Sometimes they can reset it remotely, and then if it's popped out, then we have a pool attendant, a grounds person.
But no, they automatically notify Sandoval when the arm is popped out of its socket.
If it got hit a strike.
Right, okay.
Yes, automatically.
Okay.
And then they'll let us know. Then they wait till and it's not that long, but either later in the day, depending on when it happened, later in the day or the next day, immediately we get notification of who the registration of the car was.
Okay.
If they were able to connect it right away. So it's just, I think it's very simple of getting, it's not difficult. How many did we have? Figuring out the exits, though, if they're not able to pick those up, and we do get quite a Trafalgar exit gate, if they're not able to pick up tags clearly, because some of those cameras, I think that when we talked in the September one, I want to say that the clarity, the distance, something they're not able to pick up on some of the exit gates. So if you have a certain amount on the exit gates, you may need to put in some money for better cameras that are picking up tag numbers to connect, so that might be an option. But a summary of how many did they gate strikes for the month is very simple. How many they were able to connect to someone, very simple. They can get that in no time. And then we can track throughout January how many we're aware of. But it may be a duplicate. You have security that'll put it on their report, but we already got it from Envera, or you already know. So now I've got 4 different notifications, and then I probably get 3 to 4 residents that email me as well. So being cautious of, okay, if we just reset it, was that one, or was that, are you letting me know? When are you letting me know? So,
I would make sure that we have one source, and it's when you reset the arm, who's ever doing that, their responsibility is to send an email to a particular point person. The other information, like coming from security reports, should not be relied on because frankly, it doesn't have enough detail, and it may be duplicative. So I think having one source...
Well, you need to set up a policy when the security guy resets it. It's a physical action, and how he can report it so he gets tabulated correctly.
Every reset gets sent. And then our numbers, frankly, should match Envera's, theoretically. And that's the kind of information. Also, do they provide us the reason they can't connect to a particular car?
typically, it would just be that that person, that tag, whoever is not on a guest list, they're not a resident, they're not
in the system.
They're not in the system at all whatsoever. And it's not like you have certain security companies do have, well, no, I guess that's with, I'm not sure. There are plate readers that you can, tap in and get data. I'm not really sure.
License plate readers.
Yeah. So, I mean.
Well, it sounds like there's a significant portion.
Like maybe their technology that we've got here is not what you need.
And I guess part of this, we evaluate how to, because this is a significant portion
and
of money.
what would you do? Let's say Envera.
Frustrating thing for the community.
Let's say Envera was able to get its Joe Smith down the street. He's not connected to anyone in the community. So you know that he ran and bumped the gate bar. What are you going to do at that time?
Well, if he's not on anybody's list, number one, he's trespassing,
But
right? Unless he's a vendor or whatever.
Unless they're on the property, you can't trespass them.
Right, well, they were on the property, right?
They have to be physically on the property.
Well, if they're doing it coming in, they're on the property.
So let's say
Right.
we evaluate and it's a couple $100 damage. I'm just, at that time, you would need to implement, what would you do each time that happened?
Ron, would that be something that we could turn over?
We got an attorney guy's hand up.
That was my jump in. I mean, we do have, for deed restrictions, we do send that over after so many days to our legal counsel. Is that something we can do with gate strikes to pursue, reparations, if you will, for?
Again, it would be a damage claim. Outside residents aren't subject to the HOA rules, so we couldn't find them, only link them to a resident. And the problem is we're not able to link them to a resident. So we'd be dealing with the damage. But
do you want me to ask our investigators how much it costs to run a tag? We're pretty good at finding people.
you know what?
Maybe some service out there that you pay for.
There is, I know there are different, process servers and companies that can run tags, and there's different options. You would need to look into that as a whole. So that's what I'm saying. We can go do the analysis, but having a game plan, what do you want to do for the majority?
And that is why this conversation, it seems like it's taking a while, but it's very important because we're identifying the reasons why we're not able to collect these fines.
Right.
And in the aggregate, these fines are not only important in terms of educating and dissuading the residents from hitting, but there's a significant source of revenue. And I think if you look closely at the number of gate strikes that we did not collect over the past year, it'll shock most residents.
Well, it's 98% of them.
So, but identifying that
something in
pool and
place.
coming up with a solution, like Jonathan mentioned, is what our charge should be. And to make sure that we have all the information to hold Envira accountable, because the Envira comes back and says we weren't able to connect it.
Right.
Well, that's $100 for us per unable to connect it. Maybe we should have some audits, frankly, of what they're doing also.
I think the misnomer, though, is whether the Covenants Committee is fining through the deed restriction process or we're fining through gate strikes. I think the residents are misunderstood that just because we levy a fine, that means we collect a fine, and that's not true.
That is true. No, if we levy a fine, we should be able to collect the fine because we're linking it to a resident.
Well,
Correct, but
I'll
it's
tell
just
you what I think.
If they had felt like they had enough to fine, sometimes there's good cases that come across that it's not voted on to fine that person. There's not enough evidence, even
From the committee?
From the committee.
Okay.
No, but I'm saying,
I mean, there's people that come in here and admit that they did it, they get fined. So I mean, to me, it's very frustrating. I mean, there's a person that honestly comes in and tells you, and then they get fined. So you have all these other 30 that don't admit it. You never hear hide nor hair them, and they get off free. So I really think you're finding the wrong people.
Well, we teach
Because
everybody
you
hitting the
only
gate.
fined
is-
2.
I think that's what we're working
But
on.
outside residents are not subjected, is what Ron said.
Well, if they're not
We can
linked.
use the
If they're not
service
linked.
and identify the owner of a vehicle that strikes, resident or not, we can send them a bill, and we probably collect 30-40% of those
Can you,
What are you
Can
going to
you-
send them a bill for?
for
Taking
damage.
the arm out of the cradle?
Yeah, for damage to our
How much
gates,
does that cost?
but
$100.
aren't
They
they
don't
going to
know.
say, that's my car, you can't
Well, if
prove
you
I was
call
driving
both,
it?
I have to put it
Like,
back in
who are you
the cradle.
fooling?
But I'm saying if we can identify who they are and we send them a bill, a certain percentage of them are going to pay that bill, and that's revenue.
Well, I think that is another option once we identify these
further
this pool
explore
of
that.
uncollectibles and the reasons for it, and we'll come up with a variety of options. And just to clarify one last point, if the individual striking the gate is not a resident, that still does not mean that we can't collect a fine. The key here is whether they can be linked to a resident, and then that resident will have to pay the fine. But We can maintain a damages case
Right.
against outside residents, but that is,
I think the difference is Casey was saying connect to and not identify, and that's two different processes.
yeah, there's two reasons to exclude. They couldn't identify the car for whatever reason. That's one bucket. Another bucket, they couldn't link it to a resident, and all we have is a damages case. And can we substantiate those damages? Would that be fair, Casey?
Yes, and I think that boils down to what's left in the pot that comes.
Right.
And then from there, what comes to the Covenants Committee, the hearing, the finding committee, is then boiled even further down sometimes.
Because what I don't want to happen is for it to be assumed that our management simply isn't going after these fines.
Right.
They're relying upon the information that we get, and it's up to this board to make sure that we are asking the right questions and providing the tools so we can collect these fines.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, unless you want to make a motion, but we don't need a motion to go ahead and proceed with this.
But the motion that we do need
Is
on the cases that Casey presented, the 5 accounts.
Recommended.
The Covenants Committee recommended, correct. The 5 accounts for deed restrictions, and those were $1,000 fines. One fine for code of conduct, that was a $100 fine, and then 2 gate violations that were $100 for each for the gate strikes.
I'd like to ask, those 2 that you find for the gate strikes, did they come in and admit that they did it?
I don't have the specifics on what was said at that hearing.
I don't believe so.
Yeah, I think we've had one person, maybe once, in the last 4 hearings admit, and it was still admitting to something wrong that, following in or and not coming in and paying the fine, but, so.
Word out. You admit to it, you don't have to pay.
Well, actually, I wouldn't mind that because
I don't think
Well, I mean, the point is to get people to stop hitting the gates.
yeah.
Well, and it sounds like it's not the majority of residents. The residents, you're only connecting them to a handful.
Well, the challenge there, too, is with vendors. So you have, a pest company coming in, and he's on 23 people's.
Right.
Time out. I'll make the motion that we find
Yes.
that we assess those fines. Do we have a second?
Second.
Now we can discuss. Any further discussion?
But one of the challenges with the commercial.
with the motion, are we levying the fines as well as the recommendation from the committee would like to see the use rights suspended for the code of conduct?
Oh, that's right. $100 fine in the amenities access.
Oh, to suspend the amenities access to that.
Is there a time period on that?
I was going to say I would definitely recommend a time period. I would like a time period, not an indefinite at all whatsoever.
30
That was the
days.
resident code of conduct?
Yeah.
Why don't we ask what the committee recommends?
I can go back and ask the chairperson. Maybe not to exceed a certain amount if the board would like to at least say that.
Why don't we say not to exceed 30 days and let the committee
Okay.
confirm that or deny it, because otherwise we got to wait 30 days to vote on it.
Yes.
I would say not to exceed.
Yeah, I would say not to exceed. I'd give them more time.
I think, though, too, with something like this, to take that ambiguity out of there, I think a code of conduct violation, $100 fine, 60 days revocation of your. So instead of, this, again, there's a lot of gray in a lot of these committees. I think we need something in writing that says if this is the infraction, this is the fine, and this is, you're going to lose your.
Well, then you make a motion to amend my motion to do that.
We can do that. I'll make a motion to amend Bill's motion that attached to that would be the $100 fine. That would be a standing fine for code of conduct and a standing 60-day revocation of your amenities access.
I'll accept that amendment. Who seconded it?
I'll second.
Well, no. Who seconded my original?
Ron.
Was it Ron? Okay, then you accept the amendment?
discussion?
Hell no.
Yes. So
Just a general comment. I'm shocked to hear that the cameras aren't equipped to capture every tag going out the gate. Because what if it's not a gate strike? What if it's a kidnapped child or a burglary or something of that nature? I mean, I can't imagine that every tag isn't seen going out clearly.
Yeah, I actually have that on the
My
agenda.
next comment after we voted on that. So
I
vote
was
on
waiting for
that.
Jim to record, but you're exactly right.
All it takes is money. That's all.
Well, can we just
money, we can get some more cameras. The wires are there.
But we need to collect, and these cameras will help us collect. We just need to realize.
can we vote on this and then talk about that, because it's really, I think it's very important.
all right. So the amended motion for these 5, 6, 7, 8 cases. The amendment being for the code of conduct, it would be a 60-day revocation, right, of the amenities privileges.
Yes.
And that would be standing for all
In
future.
addition to the $100.
In addition to the $100 fine, correct. So all in favor? Aye, 7.
And that was a motion
6.
to approve all the
6, I'm
fines.
opposed.
Oh, I'm
6
sorry?
to 1. 6 to
I'm
1.
opposed.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, pardon me.
So then just to dovetail what Jonathan was saying, as we're going to bring this up too, is
motion to approve all of them.
And that was a motion to approve the 7 accounts, the cases that you presented. And the amendment was to, for the code of conduct, in addition to the $100 fine, the 60-day revocation.
8 total, so 5, 1 conduct, 2
Right,
gate
5
strike.
deed restrictions, 1 code, and 2 gate violations.
And the motion was also
I'm not opposed
going
to
forward,
finding
henceforth
just one
and forevermore.
incident, not
A
every incident
60-day
from now on.
revocation.
All
I think it should be left up to
resident
Code of
conduct
con-
codes would include a
I think
60-day
we can go with $100.
revocation.
So we'll have to include that in the protocol.
so do we have a standing committee on safety and security, or whatever we call them?
We used to.
On paper, but
Okay, so once again, this is another area where a committee, we have committees for committees for committees. If they're going to be on a committee and it's a standing committee, they need to be charged with a task of, first and foremost, evaluating our camera systems at the gates, both ingress and egress, and what deficiencies there are and recommendations to fix those.
and with this property management coming in too, that's going to be one of their focuses, is doing a whole, property assessment.
Sure.
And we'll be able, and I'll meet with each one.
But I agree with you.
We'll be able to focus them in an operations agreement for those areas. And just want to make sure, based on what Al said, it had me thinking, we voted on making all code of conduct policy violations result in a 60-day suspension unilaterally
Correct, and a $100 fine
and a $100 fine.
per violation.
That particular
Code
violation.
of conduct.
Code of conduct, right. Okay,
Well, before we leave item 11,
Then for a second incident or a third incident. So that's the problem I have. I think the committee, I think you should have 100, every time somebody swears at me or whatever, he can be fined $100. And the second time, it's a 60-day fine. The third time, it's a 90-day suspension or whatever.
Well, we've been, if it's conduct, it's a $100 per incident.
Right.
So if and I warn certain,
It's conduct right now, it's $100 plus 60 days.
Right.
well,
From now on.
no,
there'll be
no,
multiple
it's
conduct
$100 per incident. So if,
Plus 60 days suspension.
Right.
Correct.
okay, are
every
you
time an
concerned it's
incident.
too aggressive or not giving any?
Well, I agree with the $100. I don't agree with the suspension. I think the suspension should be left up to the committee.
Okay.
I don't agree that everything should be left up to the committee, but I think the suspension should be. In other words, if somebody keeps on doing it, let's say, well, all I'm going to get fined is $100 or whatever.
But I
Every
think that-
time,
And you say, okay, we're going to fine you,
It could be case by case, The specific recommendation from this one was because it took place in the actual amenities, the club. You know, if it took place.
I've got no problem with this incident we were talking about.
Okay.
I'm just saying, going forward, I don't think we should have voted, pork barrel, all of them into this one vote.
Then again, what I would say is a standing committee, just like ARC-DR did, they came to us with the revision of the guidelines. Again, you charge a committee with doing something. If what we suggest is not to their liking, they are a standing committee. Come to us with a proposal on a sliding scale, like you may be suggesting, on the harshness, if you will, of that, and come to us with a proposal. Again, if we're having to do a committee's job, and we're not shrugging our responsibility of a board, but that's why we put these standing committees out there to come to us. They come to us with recommendations. So charge them with coming up. There can't be that ambiguity where A guy cusses at somebody, he gets $100 in 10 days, and B guy does the same cussing or fights somebody and doesn't get anything. There has to be concrete ramifications for that offense or multiple offenses.
Who is the liaison to the governance committee? Well, then we passed a policy. Why don't you have the governance committee review that policy and come to us with suggestions if they think it should be changed?
And I think what all of us are saying is that it needs to be as objective as possible, so no one can allege selective enforcement or showing favoritism. It doesn't mean, though.
Well, it is a hearing that they do weigh out.
When you're talking about a dirty roof or a dirty driveway, that is subjective.
Well, this one's particular to code of conduct, and the subjective nature is whether they're guilty or not. But the fine itself is set in stone, so one person who swore doesn't get just $100 in those 60 days, and the other person who swore gets $100 and 60 days.
So having something in place that says, here's the options. You could potentially get this, this, or this. Whatever the Covenants Committee comes up with, these are some options that they decide that they like okay, so if we feel like it hit this level, then this.
Circumstances.
If it hit this and it took, and I think they're great. They'll come up with something that works and makes sense, and that's across. Surely they would like something that's in place that is okay. Here's what we're not for this level of this. We're going to do this for this level of this repetitive. If it's someone that's a repeat offender, they're going to have this consequence. So
I would just say I personally do not agree with that. I think first offense should be this is the action, this is the violation, this is the penalty. If you want to increase it for the second and the third, that's fine. I just don't want two residents getting two different outcomes for the same violation. I think that sets a bad precedent, and so I'd like it to be as objective as possible.
okay.
An SOP established consequences.
Well, and remember, we could go by Shia law and say if you steal something, your arm's going to be cut off, and that can be our policy. But if that committee doesn't vote to send it to us, we never see any of those violations.
Right.
The committee is put in place by us.
They need to have a sheet or a guidance as to what the offense is and what the grade is.
That's exactly my point.
But they're deciding whether the offense is comparable to the
What's happening
penalty.
is that they're then interpreting it instead of us having a policy.
But that should be written in their charter. Those things should be delineated in that any committee's charter.
Yeah, it would only be, this is new. I believe the board just recently implemented the conduct policy.
It was June
right?
of last year,
It was-
2019.
And then there hasn't been any meeting. So I think this is new to them as well, going through these motions. And so I think this is the first time they felt like, you know what, this is an uneasy feeling, and maybe this person, should not be in the clubhouse. So that's why it came up. The other ones are cut in stone. If you have a violation, it's X amount of days, it's X amount of dollars. There's no question, there's no, when you took care of it, it could stop. That's very cut and dry to the docs and the Florida statutes. So this is the new thing, is the conduct.
Okay, so let me.
This one that we just voted on, that's the $100 fine and the 60-day suspension. what happens if a week later that same person, does the 60-day suspension begin after the end, or am I still in my window because I...
Concurrent or consecutive?
Right.
Right, and that's where there's not specifications for the conduct.
And that's what that was the point Al was making, right?
Pretty much.
So let me ask you this, Casey: if some members are a little bit pensive about having to levy a suspension of privileges, in your experience being as a GM or a CAM, is this something that is more a management position? Because do we want to subject then volunteers to be levying such harsh things, or and have management take that posture?
I think the Covenants Committee does a great job.
I do too, but I'm just...
I don't think management, it becomes, when you have a board of, when you have a specific person, it just, I don't want to be, I'll be the person that calls the police on you because you're scaring the staff, that's fine with me, but I don't want to be the one. I'll do it. I have no problem, but I think that it's a separate, you're fining, it's per the Florida statute, you have to go in front of a fining committee. And I can't be the fining committee, and there's another, I think a board member can't be on the actual committee. You could be a liaison, but you can't be on the fining committee and the board.
Okay.
So there's those Florida statutes. I can't even be a part of that, and we really need to keep it protected.
Perfect. I just wanted to make sure that people who are on the committee volunteering are comfortable and feeling safe by outing their neighbors, if you will.
Sure. Well, they're very, and yeah, they're very comfortable.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, no, I think, that's a great question, so.
All right.
Okay, before we leave item 11,
Yes.
I was approached by a member of the Covenants Committee that at the last meeting date, one of the violations received the violation on October 28th, received the fining letter on November 3rd or something, and then had to come to the meeting at November 19th. That seemed awfully fast to me anyway. Is that standard procedure that you've only got like 4 or 5 days between the notification of a violation and the notification of a fine?
So each time someone does dispute that, we do 10 days. There's been one close call of a day, but you're not getting fined in those grace period days of the 10 days. Then when the hearing notice goes out, that's 14 more days. So they're getting, and that's not counting week, sometimes we can't get to after the 10 days. You may have a weekend and they have even longer. So it's a 14-day cycle. I'm sorry, 24-day cycle. And that's so that there can be a meeting each month.
Okay, in this particular instance, it was like October the 28th for the initial letter. The fine letter was November 5th, and November 19th was the hearing.
We pull up, so
that was
the system
20 days at most.
The system generates the document, and you can't change the document date.
Okay.
And then we specifically, even though people complain that it costs extra money to mail certified, we mail certified so that it's postmark stamped, and that way when someone says that it wasn't mailed on the correct day prior to. So if you want to let me know exactly who it is, I'll pull up the date of the letter that the VMS database generates, and then the second notice date on there. And I've confirmed that you can't change the date on that form because I want to make sure my employees aren't telling me one thing and then something's going on. So every time that comes up, I make the compliance manager pull out. I want proof of the first letter date, I want proof of the second letter date, and I want to see the certified stamp date. So I would like to look into it. If it's something to where that was not done correctly, which we've not found any yet that didn't get that 14-day hearing notice, there's been some, I'm fair, and if it's something that we did on our part incorrectly, something like that, I'd be happy to.
Well, in this case, it doesn't matter because they corrected the violation before the hearing, so it was a non-issue. It was moved at the hearing, but it was just the time frame. Is it possible that so bad, so sad, you got violated on this certain day, and the Covenants Committee's meeting 18 days, so that's all the time you're going to get, just the timing of when the violation was
So
done.
the first letter goes out, and then we wait 10 days and see if that got corrected.
Well, in this case, from October 28th to November 5th wasn't 10 days.
And that's, I would like to know if
Who
you
that
have
was.
who that
The
was.
specifics.
I'd like to take a look at it because I've not seen. The closest we have is someone that said that they, it was 9 days or no, but that's not even before the 14-day hearing notice. And that was because it was dropped off at a post that the hours were hours for another place. She learned from that one. So, but I would like to look into it. If there's,
Like I said, it wasn't the person that got the letter, it was a member of the Covenants Committee. So I'll talk to that member of the committee to see if the person who got it is willing to.
it may be, it was brought up, the same situation at the meeting, and we discussed it, and I let them know what the process is and the dates and the backup, confirming that. So I've yet to come across one where, because they would, for one, we just wouldn't have them go to the hearing. Two, I would tell the hearing committee, this one needs to be removed or something, but we've not had that yet, so I would like to know the address. At least we can look into it.
Okay, and I was comfortable that we had a good policy, but they tend to say, oh, here's this letter. The meeting was on the 19th, and it just seemed like there wasn't enough time.
Because I've had cases too that they come quickly, and I think maybe your dates might be right, but I think by the time the person's getting the letters, I know one person got his letter on Wednesday, and he got the certified letter on Friday.
Do you want to change the policy for the mail-out dates?
I think there's something that when you're generating these letters and when they're getting mailed and they're getting delivered, that's counting against the person. If these two come 2 days apart, there's something not right.
And again, we had discussions on that. It was 1 day off from the 10 days, which you're not getting fined in that. And then they got their 14-day notice for hearing notice. And in those situations, there's also time for you to pick up the phone and say, hey, I just got this. This is what I'm doing, communicating, and things are established. But if you, the only, you could.
I just think there's a lot of consternation in the community about how quickly this is happening.
But also, let's not get too involved in this, because you're using Pope's system, aren't you?
No, we're using Florida statute. We're using the 40
What's
Oh,
generated?
VMS is a
VMS.
database.
So we can ask First Service how theirs works, and maybe it's a little more forgiving.
But it's not a
But it should be the same. But I'm just
manual. So it's a
automated.
No, we pick the dates. You have to mail this by this date. You have to inspect by this date. You have to go re-inspect by this date. You have to mail the certified by this date. Then between that date and the hearing, you have to go and inspect more times to make sure they don't go to the hearing and they already corrected the problem. Just to give grace, you don't have to, but so they don't have that. So it's our dates of saying, it's actually the policies that's in place for.
Right.
It's not nobody's automatically sending anything. We have to go in on that date, pick the date, and then calculate out how many days, 10 days out. So you could say, okay, from now on, we want everyone that has a violation, instead of a 10-day notice, we're giving them 20 days, but then count in the 14-day violation hearing notice. So, if that's something that you want to change and give more time for the first notice to the second notice, but right now it's 10 days.
Let's hold
And it's
off
10
and let-
calendar days.
10 calendar
Not
days.
business days. It's
let
10
me
calendar days.
Check with the person who came to me to see if that person wants to come to you, and then we can see. Maybe I was given the wrong dates. Let's just see if there's any validity to that.
Yeah, we have a lot. I mean, it's the community is right now. We are. I mean, the compliance manager. We're not able to document every single one, but there's a lot of people that are upset, and they're very upset to the point of cursing out and things like that, and coming up with things that, so this is something that we've tasked the compliance manager to do, and we're getting a lot of backlash on it. And it's only 3 months into it.
Yeah.
So if you want it, we're open to whatever you feel, but nobody's cutting corners. There's not things like that going on. I'm overseeing it. I can just tell you firsthand that 10 days notice and then 14 days notice after that. So you have 24 days.
Well, I misunderstood you. When you said you went in to make sure nobody was changing the date in it.
She can't go backdate a letter and tell me that she sent it on this date.
Okay.
I just wanted to double check because if I hear something like that, I want to make sure because
So
I'm
just,
not.
just so I'm clear, somebody is violated on January 1st.
Okay.
They get say they get a letter on January 1st that they have a violation.
So it would be inspected on the 31st. On possibly the 1st, the letter goes out on the 1st. Say
Right,
that.
the 1st. So they're going to get a friendly reminder or a notice of violation.
If it's a friendly reminder would be for something that not everybody gets a friendly reminder. When you have things that have been overlooked for a long period of time, we do a 10-day typically for large items. Pressure washing is a large. It's unsightly. If you have a lawn ornament that you're not supposed to have, you're going to get a friendly reminder.
Okay, so on January 1, I get my roof is dirty.
10-day notice. That's a 10-day to cure.
Cure.
Right.
So 10 days from there, from that period, I should be receiving a certified letter.
So then inspections take place after the 10 days. Yeah. So you probably have a window of a day. If there's a weekend, you may get.
Okay.
So after the 10 days, it would be inspected again to confirm that the violation is still pending. And then a picture's taken, and then a certified letter's mailed with a photo attached, and you're given 14 days to come to the hearing.
So the earliest that certified letter could be sent would be on the 10th, correct?
11.
Or the
On the 11th.
Right.
Okay, that'd be the earliest. But
If
you're taking time to take a picture and get it might be the 14th or something like that.
Right. There's time, with the holidays. You have the
So
weekend.
there's no way theoretically, though, with the policy that's in place, that somebody should be getting a violation notice on the 1st and that other on the 3rd or the 4th.
Correct.
And I think that's a good point. Before saying these things and blaming management, I think we need to have documents to back up these allegations. I'd like to see them because from what I'm hearing, 10 days is not a arbitrary time frame. That it's 10 days, they're not moving that around. And so I really would like to see these examples that you guys have raised that don't comport with what you said.
Me too, because I would be, and the ones that have come up, some have gone by the wayside, they weren't able to find, or some, I agree. If there's a day off on that 10 days, it doesn't mean you're automatically, you still have time to correct. And it's $100 per day, up to $1,000. So if you correct it on day one, these are people that maybe have not corrected them in the whole entire time. So, if it's bumping it to a different amount of days or something, but that's the grace period, the 10 days, and then 14 days before the hearing. But they have the option on there. Call, let us know. If you have it booked, I have pressure washing. That's why I mentioned. The Covenants Committee, management, flexible. But if you're telling me that you love this pressure washing company and they're booked out for a month, unfortunately, we can't wait a month for you. You're going to have to shop around and find another pressure washing company sometime.
So just then telling you that they're on the schedule is not going to delay the fining because it's not done.
What if it's 6 months? On the schedule?
What we do is we'll let the Covenants Committee know how long, they're scheduled on X, Y, and Z, or they'll let us know. But we typically don't let it go past a certain amount of time. And so it's by the next cycle of a hearing, to wait because you want to wait for a certain pressure washing company. It's, you have to take care of that. You're in a deed restricted community and you should have your contractor scheduled or yourself.
Well, from what I'm hearing, we've got a reasonable policy.
Yes.
People that have complained, let's go out to them and say, show me the proof that
Sure.
it was fast, and then we'll look into it
Sure.
and prove those dates, or don't complain anymore.
Yeah, I would. If there is a flaw that is in the system, by all means, I would love to see that and then work to correct it if that is the case.
But you don't see a flaw right now on management's end and the governance committee's end in the process. You think that's a doable process with reasonable timeframes?
I think so. I think because what we're doing is we're still being lenient even when you're getting the hearing notice. It's not like, oh, 10 days you didn't fix it, now you're getting fined. It's you're not communicating, or you're not taking care of it at all, and you're ignoring it. Then all of a sudden you're at the hearing, which a lot of people with these, I wouldn't say a lot, but you have a good portion of people not even caring to show up.
The dog ate my letter.
So
And are those hearing times convenient for the residents?
they're in the evening.
Perfect.
No, what do they start at 4?
3 of them.
I think is it 3?
Well, if
Why
somebody,
are we here so late then, Al?
if somebody were working, got off work at 5, it took them 45 minutes to get here, and they told you I can't be there till 6, you would accommodate them, would you?
Sure. Right. Let it communicate. Let us know.
They're at 3 o'clock.
They are at 3. Jeez, they go long. You do have,
My phone says.
You're on Central
it's a
Time, though.
hearing. They hear people out. So, all right. I do have open forum items.
Okay, hang on, we're not there yet.
Oh, okay.
All right, so let's talk now. Next on the agenda is new business, establishing ad hoc committees and board liaisons. In November, Casey sent out a solicitation seeking 3 to 5 volunteers in support of standing up a cable internet ad hoc committee, to review the governing documents to see what exactly our obligations are, as well as to explore future options for consideration. And the board is well aware of the ongoing issues with the current level of service CenturyLink provides. So the work this ad hoc committee will do is timely and necessary. So if you could identify, please, the volunteers who came forward to join the Cable Internet Ad Hoc Committee. Thanks.
Sure. We have Tom Naffel off Lambay Court. It's Knafel. Then we have Steve Casons off Lambay Court. And then we have Alice Short off Wynwood Place. And they did also include some information about themselves as well.
All right.
I thought Dave Nerone told me he had sent you a request to be on the committee.
Was it which one? The Elections Committee?
No,
Or
on
the
cable internet.
I don't remember seeing that one.
Yeah, I don't. I can reach out to him, ask he send that in. I'm just seeing if he went into the other.
All right, so at this time, is there a motion?
N-E-R-M-O-E.
Say it.
N-E-R-M-O-E. Dave.
No. I didn't get anything from him, Bill.
Okay.
But one of you will reach out to him?
Sure.
Okay. All right, so is there a motion from a board member on these nominated
Committee.
to set the committee? And for a board liaison? Do we have a volunteer? Thank you, Al Roper. All right, do we need to vote on this? Yeah.
Who
All right.
seconded that motion? Who seconded?
So-
thanks.
Scott did, right?
Well-
Yeah, I saw Scott's hand. No? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's what it
We're
was.
getting late here. So Bill and then Scott, the second.
You know, thinking about it, it may not have been Dave that said that to me. It could have been Bill Dunker. D-U-N-K-E-R. Reach out to both of them. See if either one of them were interested.
I'm just going to send back out.
Recruit them both.
Because it was at the meeting last night, and I don't remember which one said that now.
Oh, that's funny. All right, so all in favor of the three names that Casey identified, three residents, and Al serving as the board liaison. All in favor of standing up this ad hoc committee, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Nobody. Perfect. Thank you. And next we need to stand up the ad hoc election committee that we talked about earlier, Ron, comprised of volunteers to assist with the board of directors election scheduled for March 4th, namely the election procedures, the electronic voting process, and supporting the annual meeting scheduled for March 4th. So, Casey, again, if you'd please read the volunteers who responded to your solicitation, please.
For the Elections Committee names submitted, we have Lee Brill from Ashbury, Denise Nedgefeld, Belleville, Jerry Kearns, Somerville Loop, Jack Pounds, Verdmont, Annette Eiselhan, Woodburn, Eric Nicolai, Ashbury, Stan Toro, Verdmont, Kathleen Falastini, Ashbury, Ginny and Jean Henspeter, Vero Court.
All right, very good. So there were 10, and I'm sure we'll need more, especially when we get closer to the date for the counting and whatnot, so we'll put out a second solicitation, if you will.
Denise and Lee were both vital components of the electronic voting.
Correct.
Recruit them to help us get the oversight.
Mm-hmm. And I met with Lee like 2 weeks ago. We sort of sketched out some stuff, and she shared the findings and the steps of the process.
Wonderful volunteers.
Absolutely.
Very intelligent. They just talk to me.
Oh, actually, you know, again, the community needs these volunteers, and it's great that they step forward. Absolutely. All right, so
Sorry.
is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the 10 volunteer committee members and to self-nominate as the board liaison.
Okay. All in favor?
I'll second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Second.
All in favor? All in favor? Aye. All right, everybody, 7. All right, the motion both motions passes then to stand up the two committees. And as we discussed earlier, you're going to solicit for the tennis and pickleball players, and that they'll help make recommendations to the board regarding moving forward with the resurfacing and striping of courts. All right. New business, the property management transition we added. And as you all know, we decided to go with First Service to proceed with negotiations with the First Service residential company. So I'm going to ask somebody from the negotiation team to maybe give a short update.
Well, Ron and I have a meeting with Travis tomorrow morning at 9. Good for you.
Yes.
Scott's unavailable, so he won't be there.
Okay. But we're progressing.
They sent us their boilerplate contract. We sent it to Ron Caves at Becker and Polikoff. He made changes. We met, looked at those changes, and made some additional changes. Sent it back to him to clean up. He then sent it to First Service, who has reviewed it. They sent it back. I haven't actually read what they sent back.
They incorporated our changes, and our attorney has it now. We're very, very close to signing. Substantively, we are on the same page. I just need to get our counsel to sign off, which hopefully will be done tomorrow. But we're on track to have this signed likely tomorrow, Monday or Tuesday, the latest. And it's been a very, very easy negotiation. We basically set out our expectations, and they're
Perfect.
reliable.
And we Melanie and I and Scott from the RFP, we've seen their proposed transition plan. So, you know, we're sort of anxiously awaiting, starting, welcoming them, and getting them in front of the community, too.
And in their recent email, they are acknowledging a January 1st start date. They're comfortable with that still. And they're already taking steps in terms of insurance and making sure that they are doing everything on their end, even though they don't have a signed contract yet.
Perfect. Good to hear.
So we need to confirm tomorrow that they can produce our coupon books for assessment payments on January 1st.
Right.
So they'd have to do that even before They're in management.
I had that as a sidebar discussion with you, so thank you for
Are they,
raising it.
doing it prior to the
Right.
December 1st, like
Yeah.
as soon as possible?
Or January 1st.
January 1st, sorry.
Yeah.
Do you have a hard date that those need to go out by?
Well, if they're due on, I mean, they need, I would say 14 days at least to
Okay.
mail out.
Yeah.
The board could say, okay, the first coupon's not due on January 1st, it's due on January
Well, it's the 10,
7th or 10th.
But it's achievable.
there's
so
usually a 10-day
We'll
period,
ask them if it's
grace
still-
period, 10-day, yeah. But that's good. It's good to hear, and again, everyone's excited and anxious. So thank you for that. All right, next we have the solicitation for additional agenda items.
Heck no.
Unfortunately, I got a bit of a list. One of the issues I've noticed occurring more frequently is there's a couple vehicles that have large base that are waking people up, shaking their houses, and it's not even a point where it's even a question. It's just ridiculously disrespectful. I know the city had their noise policy. I believe, did we table our noise policy? Do you remember that, Bill?
I don't remember.
Because we tried to implement our own. So we would have the tools that if this is a ongoing concern, we could take some action. I would like to add this as an agenda item. The next agenda item would be, I would like us to do some research and discuss as a board putting up a solar speed sign on Sandoval Boulevard. People coming in through the veteran gates are accelerating. I've seen 50 miles an hour, and there's two crosswalks there. Somerville has to walk right through that crosswalk. There's another crosswalk where there's little dogs walking across over to Calypso Park, and there's a lot of kids. I think that, unfortunately, our efforts to communicate the need to slow down has not been effective.
Right.
I think we need to take into consideration, our other options. And one of them would be to set up a speed control sign and maybe camera it. And frankly, if there's egregious violations, those violations would go to fund the solar sign. I would at least like us to discuss that as a possible solution. The next agenda item is I've noticed we've had these nice new gates and there's damage to two of our new gates already. I would like to discuss if there is any way that we identified who did that damage, number one, and number two, what the timeline is to repair that damage. The next one would be the discussion for adding cameras at all exit gates so we can evaluate any gate hits there and other considerations. And I think that we need to pay particular close attention to any feedback we're getting from Envera about any cameras that are not working optimal. If they're too far away, if there's some vision issues, but I think we need to take an evaluation, and that may be another third pot of reasons why we're not capturing these violations. And finally, I would like to follow up on violations as an agenda item. There's two important portions of this discussion. One is whether our current system is not operating correctly. I'm hearing 4 and 5 days notice. Casey's saying that's not possible. Our system says 10 days. That is one thing. But the other portion of this, which we really didn't get to, was more of the substance of the policy that's created by the board. Casey's clearly amenable to us moving it to 14 days. It's a discussion for the board to have whether the time period to respond to these letters is appropriate. That's a very different question than whether the system is broken. And I think that we should identify whether the system's broken based upon these cases, and I'd ask for you to clear that up. least then we can move on to whether the timeframes are appropriate. And that's my agenda item.
Okay. Any other additional agenda items? All right. And some of these we talked about, and the taskings were there. And as far as the research with the solar speed signs, we did some preliminary research and we've pulled some information. And with some of those radar cameras, they're movable. So as you said, the Veterans Gate, but coming in from Pine Island too, Melanie can attest to this. There's stop signs at Lambay and stop signs at Vareo, and they just blow through.
And I don't use it, so I didn't mean to leave it out.
You know, no, I'm just saying.
Melanie's a speeder?
No, she can attest. She's seen these people too. And maybe Trafalgar, I'm not sure. But with some of these, they're mobile, so you can move them and reposition. We can do a study to see, again, the time, the who, the what with the cameras. You can then see if they're commercial vendors, UPS trucks, post office, or residents. All a concern. The crosswalks and then blowing through stop signs, it won't help us in those instances because we also get complaints about people blowing through the stop signs, as well as not stopping when people are in the crosswalk or at the crosswalk. So all of this is, just safety within the community, a huge issue. And we also got some feedback from Pope. We asked Pope, how are they addressing this in other communities, that we can share that information with you as well. And that was done you came in July or August? So, I mean, it's recent information.
After August.
Is
Yeah.
this for information only, or are we going to be considering fining people, or what are you suggesting?
Frankly, I am of the firm belief that most people, I'm sure, are driving appropriately, and therefore the signs aren't for them. It's for the people that are driving egregiously fast, violating our speed limit rules that should pay for it, frankly. If we were to put permanent signs in there, when I researched it, it was about $8,000. I do think over a course of a year or two, we're getting people that are going 50 miles an hour down Sandoval Boulevard. I want to see them fined and educated.
Yeah. One of the challenges with using these cameras and these radar systems is, again, they need to be calibrated. They need to, this needs to be tested regularly to ensure that they're accurate. So that's a science in itself as well that would need to be explored, who and how best.
One thing that the statute allows us to do, though, and I just found this out through one of our resident retired police officers, and I'm going to get more information on it. Statute has changed where it allows us now to, without having to comply with a lot of the DOT regulations, is to relegate traffic enforcement, i.e. speeding, to Lee County Sheriff's Office. But then the statute also changed where if Cape Coral and Lee County is amenable to it, we can do it to the local jurisdiction of Cape Coral, I believe. And that would be if we wanted to just do speeding and not have to do changes to line of sights with the intersections and things like that. So I'd be more than happy to touch base with them to get that statute that allows us to do that. If we don't have to spend thousands of dollars, and if we can get our own police department to write those violations and take that onus off of us, write speeding tickets or whatever.
And that requires an MOU, a memorandum of understanding with the police. So, I mean, that's very doable. It was one of the options that we identified when we were exploring
roads do not
this.
have to be legal?
No.
So,
Or the speed limit of 24?
$35,000 upgrade everything.
It's going to be more than that because you have to get rid of every island.
That was one of the things they told us, that if you...
all right.
if we
So,
did- if the
any
police did it,
other additional
they'd change the
items?
speed limit of
Anybody?
what the city would be.
Is there a motion to adjourn this and move to the open forum?
So moved.
All right, Mr. Tubbs, thank you. A second? Melanie, thank you. All right. Casey.
Okay.
Our resident comments, please.
The first one is from Craig Snyder, Belleville. What is your office procedure for handling incoming phone calls to the clubhouse? If the first person is busy and can't answer, does the call roll to a second person to answer? If no one answers and a message is left, what is the time frame for returning calls? Are all calls returned within 24 hours? Our protocol in place, and I confirmed it with all team and staff members, is that the current call, I just want to not mess it up. For one, yes, our policy is to return the call within 24 hours. If it's a weekend, the compliance manager did say sometimes she's on property quite a bit, so hers could be a little bit longer, but 24 hours is the goal. Our admin returns the calls same day, so does our receptionist as well. But what happens is the incoming call comes into the reception desk, and then there's an option to hold and accept a second call because she should be able to dual hold, yes, let me take a message, and then get the other call. If she's not able to take the call, then it will roll over to the admin's desk there. So that is our policy in place for phone calls coming in. The next open forum question is from Mr. Swaggart off Greendale. And subject: suggestion for improved traffic flow into and out of Sandoval for reduced gate maintenance. As we all know, gate damage and backups entering and exiting Sandoval are a constant problem. I submit the following suggestion for the Board of Directors and resident consideration to improve the situation. During regular daylight or business hours, keep all gates and bars open. Almost without exception, anyone exiting or entering Sandoval during the day is either a resident, delivery truck, or a person with a legitimate reason to be here. After sunset or regular business hours, keep all gates closed. Residents would enter, exit with their regular vehicle codes or Sandoval ID cards. All visitors would require approval through the Envera system to enter the community. From my discussions with an outside contractor, it is estimated that with keeping all the gates open during the day, our gate usage and damage could be reduced by approximately 80%. This type of arrangement is common in many gated communities and is also utilized by our neighbor Cape Royal. I encourage the Board of Directors to discuss this suggestion and perhaps send an informal survey to the residents to determine their level of satisfaction in implementing this type of gate system. Thank you for your consideration.
Are we able to discuss this at all?
On topic, but we can't make.
Okay. I spoke with Jim about this today, and I appreciate that he's trying to come up with a solution.
Yes.
Because frankly, the gates probably are one of the most frustrating aspects here in Sandoval. A couple things I want to point out: our dog parks are already taxed. There's a lot of people that aren't residents that get in and bring their dogs there. We deal with a lot of trespassers. The only way for us to determine who's allowing these trespassers in is the gate system. The way we keep out people that were trespassed, frankly, is the gate system. I think a lot of the problems we have with the gates being broken are from residents hitting them or non-residents hitting them. So I think there's areas, though, that we can improve on. I think that we can try to expedite the repair process. I understand the exit gate was 10 days. I understand that they said it was for a part. It's 10 days seems like a long time to have a gate wide open while you're making all these people wait in line. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So I bet you if we really pressed them, they could have gotten that done quicker. I also think that we should be sending out instructional videos, whether quarterly or twice a year. We have a lot of new residents. We need to, and these have to be videos with our management literally out there or some volunteers.
The same as Jerry, the general manager, did before.
Exactly, or explaining, for instance.
The communications committee asked me to do one right when I first started, but it was...
For instance, a lot of people don't understand why you have to wait at the one white line, not go right up behind the person. It's because there's magnets in between those lines, and those magnets identify trailers, boats, that type of thing, so the gates don't close on the car. But if you're in that area, it could basically lead to you following in after a gap and hitting the gate. And I think that happens sometimes, and that's user error. The other thing is realization, like we discussed, spent a lot of time tonight, realization of fines. It's an important education tool. You pay $100 a couple times, you're going to wait at the first white line and not damage our gates. I just think that the main point is that, and also updating our camera system and adding it to the exits. I just think before we make any decision, we really have to understand the consequences. We have gates for a reason, and we've had a significant increase when it came to trespassers, and our amenities are already taxed with 1,425 homes here, and that would have an impact there also. But thank you, Jim, and I appreciate all your attempts and everything you do for this community.
Indeed.
That was all that I had. Double check. That was my notes, and that was, yes, that's
Okay,
it.
Perfect. Very good.
I have one that just came in. This is from.
Was it before noon today? Go ahead.
It came in 2016. It just came in to 4 of us anyway. This is from Richard Hernandez on Greendale. It says, since Casey is adamant that violation letters give a 10-day period to respond or correct a violation, seems like a trap for foreign homeowners. How long will it take a letter to reach a remote residence in Canada? It would seem that a longer grace period would be warranted so that a vendor could be set up or a foreign owner could respond to rectify the violation.
That's on the agenda. We didn't get to even discuss really the grace period because it was whether the system was broken or not. But
Right.
I think we've addressed that by saying it's going to be an agenda item. We can talk about the time
And
period.
to clarify, it's not my grace period day, it's not my protocol, it's something that was in place from management, from Pope management, and that is typical to what they do at other properties.
And there also has been some suggestions and some discussion about an email as well as the posted mailed letter. So an email, regardless of where you are, you would get it instantaneously. And that's an option too.
Sure, I think that right now it's the mass quantity that's
Right.
going out, and you want to
We're playing
start.
catch up.
People come in cussing us out because we didn't call them, we didn't email, and right now it's a best case scenario system for a mass quantity. So.
And there could be a speed difference between your first letter, which is regular post, and the second letter might, I don't know, if it's two couple days quicker or whatever. So that could make it seem like they're closer together.
Sure, absolutely. I don't disagree with the mail, snail mail, but it's documenting. I didn't get the email versus here's, it's what's in place right now, and there's always room for improvement.